Good morning. We see before us the case of Mrs. Frankield, who is charged that on and around the 21st of November 2017, she did inflict grievous bodily harm, contrary to Section 18 of the Offences Against the Person Act, 1861, on Mr. Frankield, and using controlling or coercive behaviour in an intimate or family relationship pursuant of Section 76 of the Serious Crime Act 2015. She is further charged that on the 10th, 13th and 15th of December, she did again inflict grievous bodily harm on Mr. Frankield that required medical attention at the local hospital. The case is 4 counts of GBH and the use of controlling and coercive behaviour. Mrs. Frankield, on charge 1 of the use of controlling or coercive behaviour, do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
On the charges of committing grievous bodily harm against Mr. Frankield, do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Are the defence ready to proceed with the case?
We are, my lady.
Prosecution?
Yes, my lady.
Very well. You, the jurors, will now hear speeches from both the prosecution and the defence counsel. You are reminded that what they say may not necessarily be taken as fact. You will also hear witness from various people who will swear an oath to tell the truth. You must listen to all the discussion, and then it will be down to you to decide if Mrs. Frankield is guilty or not guilty of the crime she's being accused of. Very well. Mrs. Smithers, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, my lady. Members of the jury, domestic abuse, for this is what we are actually talking about here, happens far more than we could possibly realise. We believe strongly that this has happened in this case. We will show you that Trevor Arnold Frankield is a man who has been almost completely destroyed. He has gone from the life of the party to someone who can barely get up in the morning. The abuse he has been subjected to has been more than just physical. It has been mental, controlling, overpowering, and manipulating. My learned friend, the defence, will paint a very interesting picture of Mrs. Frankield, one which we will be challenging strongly. We intend to show that she is in fact a cold, dangerous, and vindictive lady who needs to be placed safely behind bars. We will show, however, a 3-year period she has systematically removed every ounce of confidence that Trevor had and has inflicted on him scenes of violence even I do not want to have to think about. The case before you is of 4 counts of domestic abuse, GBH, and the use of coercive and controlling behaviour. However, let me tell you, this is just the tip of a very large and very overpowering iceberg. This person has inflicted great pain on a poor, defenceless man. She's convinced him that he's useless, and he has believed it. After all, he is a man. Surely he can stand up to a woman. She has compounded the lie that men do not suffer from domestic abuse. We intend to show this is not the case. 1 in 6 men suffer the pains of domestic abuse, and 1 in 4 women. Every 30 seconds, someone calls to report a case of domestic abuse. This year alone, 30 men will die as a result of domestic violence. 30. Mrs. Frankield is a cold, manipulative woman, and I hope that you will see through the smokescreen displayed by the defence and see the facts as they are and find the defendant guilty of all charges. Thank you, my lady.
Mr. Dempsey.
Thank you, my lady. Members of the jury, you see before you today in the dock A lady who has been falsely accused. Someone whose profession is caring for people, who is the picture of professionalism and tolerance, and who has been broken by slanderous lies. She married Mr. Frankield, and for 4 years their marriage was a happy one. Then, as sometimes happens, things started to go wrong. She noticed a lack of passion from her partner and felt a rejection from him. Over a period of time, this only proved to get worse. Then there was the question of an affair with a neighbour. She has faced both verbal and physical abuse from Mr. Frankield, sometimes to the point of being scared for her own safety. However, my friends, Mrs. Frankield does not want you to think badly of her husband. He is a sick man, a man who needs professional care, care which she deeply regrets not seeking sooner. She's tried her best to look after him, but openly admits that things have got out of control. Is Mrs. Frankield guilty of the charges set before her? I say no. You have heard my learned friends say that this is domestic abuse. Is this true? Again, I say no. Members of the jury, if Edwina Frankield is guilty of anything, it is of loving Mr. Frankield so much that she's been willing to suffer the constant verbal and physical abuse towards herself. The loss of a loving relationship has hit her hard, and yet, despite having a highly stressful and challenging job, she has stuck by her man and supported him to the best of her ability during his time of need. It has hurt her deeply that Mr. Frankield would thus accuse her of this awful crime. And we intend to show that it is indeed a false accusation. Thank you, my lady.
Thank you, Mr. Dempsey, Mrs. Smithers. Members of the jury, you have heard the opening statements of the counsels, and we will now hear the case for the prosecution. Mrs. Smithers, if you are ready.
Indeed, I am. The prosecution calls WPC 235 Sanders.
WPC Sanders, if you hold your Bible in your left hand and read the card.
I swear by Almighty God that everything I say will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Officer Sanders, you were the arresting officer, is that correct?
Yes, myself and PC 346 Jones.
Was this the first time you've been called to this address?
No, I had attended on 2 or 3 occasions before.
Was this because of a dispute?
Yes.
When you attended, was Mr. Frankield injured?
He was.
What reason was given?
It was always self-inflicted. Mr. Frankield refused to say any more.
Please, can you tell us what happened on this occasion?
May I consult my notebook?
Certainly.
So, at 20:45, we were called to an address in Aston by a concerned neighbour who had heard raised voices and things being broken in the house. We arrived and could hear voices as well as we approached the front door.
My lady, we would like to at this point show Exhibit P1, which is the body cam footage taken of the time of the arrest.
My lady, we object to this evidence strongly, as it shows a very one-sided viewpoint to the situation.
then your client will have to hope that your cross-examination skills will help us get to the truth.
But I strongly object.
And your objection is noted. But I've already ruled that the video footage is admissible, so objection overruled.
Who is it?
It's the police. Can you open the door, please?
What do you want?
If you open the door, we'll tell you.
What do you want?
We've had a report of a domestic on the premises.
We're fine. You can just go away and leave us alone. It's just a disagreement, that's all. It's all sorted now.
Sorry, we just need to check the welfare of you and your husband. You all right, sir?
He's fine, aren't you, Trevor?
I'm okay.
Perhaps you could just show me the rest of the house to make sure there are no more breakages.
Well, I don't really like to leave my husband. He is upset at the moment.
It's okay. It'll only take a second or two. My colleague will stay with your husband.
Very well. Trevor, I'll be back soon.
Are you okay, love? Are you hurting anyway? Are you trying to say something?
It can't go on. It can't go on.
Okay, love. I understand.
See? There's nothing to see. The house is fine. It's just a disagreement. We get them. Every couple gets them.
Edwina Frankield, I am arresting you on the suspicion of inflicting grievous bodily harm on Trevor Frankield. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention, when questioned, something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence.
Are you mad? I haven't done anything. I'm his wife. We simply had an argument. He never meant to...
Take it outside, PC Jones. I'll radio in for support. 236 to control. I'm going to need an ambulance and a transport to the domestic abuse. One being taken into custody, and I think the male needs medical attention.
When you and PC Jones arrived at the property, how would you say Edwina was feeling?
Objection. The witness cannot say how my client was feeling. It calls for assumption.
Sustained.
I will rephrase. How did Mrs. Frankield behave? Was it calm or agitated?
She was in a high state of agitation.
You entered the house, as we have seen from the footage. What was your perception of Mr. Frankield?
I found Mr. Frankield in the corner of the room. He had bruises to his face and his arms, and it was not clear what had caused them, but it appeared that they were not self-inflicted.
Objection. The witness is not a medical expert and as such cannot define whether these injuries were inflicted by Mr. Frankield himself, on himself, or Mrs. Frankield.
Sustained. The jury will disregard that last statement.
Officer Sanders, how long have you been a police officer?
18 years.
In that time, have you come across a scene like this before?
Not like this.
While you were talking to Mr. Frankield, did you make any observations about his character?
He was terrified, scared. He exhibited almost paranoid behaviour. He didn't want to talk to me. He kept looking at Mrs. Frankield, like she had some sort of a hold over him.
At what point did Mr. Frankield suggest that his injuries were due to Edwina?
PC Jones took her into another room, and once he was sure that she could not see or hear him, he told me.
What did he say, to remind us?
He said it couldn't go on. He had tears in his eyes, and it was very hard to understand him, but I could see he needed help.
Thank you, officer. No further questions.
Mr. Dempsey, your witness.
Officer Sanders, have you received any specialist training when it comes to mental health issues?
No, I haven't.
So you are not a mental health expert?
No.
And yet you diagnose that this man is suffering from paranoia?
I said he looked like he was exhibiting that behaviour. I did not say he was diagnosed with it.
Quite. How did Mrs. Frankield seem during this invasion of their house by you and Officer Jones?
She was very agitated, annoyed, almost angry, as the video showed.
So 2 police officers arrive at their home late in the evening and force their way inside, and you are surprised that they seem annoyed?
We were called there because of an argument by a neighbour.
No, yes, the helpful neighbour. Who was the informant?
They wish to remain anonymous.
How convenient. So a mystery person says that there is a fight going on and you barge your way into a house, see a man who medical records report state suffer from severe mental health issues, who is cowering in a corner, quite possibly from your arrival, and you arrest my client and take her away. Is that how it happened? I mean, that is what the video appears to show.
No, we assessed the situation and took the appropriate action.
As you saw it, without all the facts.
There were injuries on the man's body that could not be explained as just accidental. Given the same situation again, I would have made the same decision and rescued the man.
I put it to you that you grossly overreacted. That what you heard was Mrs. Frankield trying to calm her husband from yet another one of his many bouts of violence against her. You simply got the wrong end of the stick.
No, I do not believe that to be the case.
You say that Mr. Frankield told you it couldn't go on. Is that correct?
Yes.
What did you take him to mean by that?
That he couldn't cope with the abuse anymore.
Is it not possible that he was in fact admitting his behaviour, his violent outbursts could not go on?
I don't know. I don't think so.
But you don't know. And yet you arrested an innocent woman.
We made a choice on the night.
No more questions, my lady.
You may step down.
The prosecution calls Scott Reynolds to the stand.
Mr. Reynolds, if you would take the Bible in your left hand and read the
I
card.
swear to Almighty God that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Mr. Reynolds, for the sake of the court, can you tell me how you know Mr. Frankield?
I used to work with on the building site. He was my boss.
Would you say you knew him well?
We used to work hard and play hard.
I'm sorry.
Oh, we would go to the pub after work and sometimes have a little bit too much to drink.
Mr. Frankield has been off work for about a year, is that correct?
Yes, he left due to stress.
Stress?
We were on a big project and, well, we were working all the hours, and the deadlines kept being moved. He was getting grief from above to deliver on time or face crippling fines. And he just didn't turn up one day. And when they called, he was in hospital, having tried to take an overdose.
I'm sorry. I know this must be hard to talk about.
It's okay.
Did you go around to see if he was okay?
Yes, but he wouldn't let me in.
Wouldn't or couldn't?
Objection.
I'll rephrase. Did he open the door to you when you went round to see him?
No, he He spoke to me through a window.
Did you not think that was a little odd?
Well, I do now, but not at the time.
Can you tell me what happened when you went round in the evening to see him when Mrs. Frankield was present?
Well, I called around about 7:30. I was on my way home and, wanted to take him for a drink. I rang the doorbell and he answered the door. I asked him if he wanted to go for a drink. He was thinking about it. Then she walked up behind him.
By she, you mean Mrs. Frankield?
Yeah, she just walked up behind him and said, "Trevor!" Colour drained from his face and he just walked away. She told me he's not well and I was not to keep coming around bothering him. And if she did, she'd call the police. And she just shut the door in my face.
Did you go back again?
Well, once, but I couldn't get him to answer the door.
Maybe he was out.
Nah. I could see him sat on the sofa, he just didn't move. I'm ashamed to say that I didn't try again. But I'm here for him now. And I'll do whatever it takes to stop that evil woman from attacking him again.
Objection, my lady.
Sustained. Jury, you will disregard that last statement.
Mr. Reynolds, thank you for your witness. I know that Mr. Frankield values your support highly. No further questions.
Mr. Reynolds, was Trevor a good boss?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Reliable?
Yes.
Trustworthy?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Honest?
Yes, he was, yeah.
I'd like you to have a look at this report, which you countersigned. Is that your signature?
Yes, it is.
How many hours does it declare that that particular job requires?
46.
And how many hours did it actually take?
Can't remember.
Let me refresh your memory. 25 hours as logged in the site book.
You say so.
I do. And what's more, so do the books. How many hours did you bill for?
Don't know.
Well, you signed the invoice. 46 hours.
Yeah, again, if you say so.
So you defrauded the site of 21 hours.
Look, it's just one of those things sometimes. You know, the hours differ a bit. Everyone does it.
So you say Mr. Frankield is honest, and yet he is willing to steal considerable amounts of money from a client. Do you like Mrs. Frankield?
No, I do not.
Why is that?
Because of the way she treated Trevor.
Allegedly.
I saw that man change. He dissolved. He went from a confident man to a cowering wreck, too scared to answer the door.
You blame my client, but yet is it not possible that perhaps the stress of the work that he was doing caused that change to happen, and not my client?
I don't know.
No, you don't know. And yet you are happy to blame my client. Mr. Reynolds, is that the first time that you met Mrs. Frankield?
Yes, I think it was.
What about the time that you met in the Dog and Duck pub, when you and Trevor had had way too much to drink and she came to take him home?
I don't remember that.
No, I don't suppose that you would remember. Is it not true that Mrs. Frankield had to call the police that night because you assaulted her? She had to have you arrested, and that you spent the night in the cells and was lucky that she was gracious enough not to press charges against you, even though, and it is on record, that you said, "I will get even with you no matter what."
I was drunk.
I put it to you that you saw Trevor going down under the due stress of the pressure of work that he was doing, and you saw the chance to lay the blame at the door of Mrs. Frankield and get even with her.
No. It's not like that.
No more questions.
But I know what I saw.
No more questions. Please, step down.
The prosecution calls Dr. Tracy Wright.
Dr. Wright, would you take the Bible in your left hand and read the card?
I swear by Almighty God that everything I say will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Dr. Wright, can you tell the court what your job is?
I'm a lecturer and psychologist based at the University of Birmingham.
And prior to becoming a lecturer, can you tell the court what experience you had in the field?
I have worked in psychology since graduating Oxford University, working in various hospitals, and was also seconded to the British Armed Forces for 4 years, dealing with and researching the effects of PTSD. Sorry, post-traumatic stress disorder.
So, in your time, you will have interviewed many women and men who have suffered life-changing psychological traumas. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's fair to say.
You interviewed Mr. Frankield on how many occasions?
I saw him twice, once in February and then again a month ago.
And what was your professional opinion of Mr. Frankield?
He's a man who has suffered consistent and lengthy trauma.
Were you able to find out through interview what exactly caused the trauma?
Not conclusively, no. It is clear that he has become mentally unstable due to a stress of some form, but our sessions were very difficult and it was almost impossible to pin him down as to the exact cause.
Could it have been Mrs. Frankield?
Objection. That calls for assumption.
Sustained. Mrs. Smithers, the witness has already made it clear that she cannot be conclusive, so don't continue with this line of questioning.
Very well, my lady. You spoke at length with Mrs. Frankield. What were your thoughts on her mental state?
Edwina has issues related to the desertion of her father when she was only a young girl. She was 8 when he left the marital home for another woman, and it was some 18 months before her mother discovered that Edwina had incorrectly blamed herself for her father's departure. She felt that she had not been lovable enough, that she had made him ashamed of her. She did receive some counselling through the NHS, but the funding was not there for sustained support. I feel it's clear that this has developed a very caring nature in her, and this can sometimes be exhibited as controlling behaviour.
Violent controlling behaviour?
I'm not saying that. I can't say that for sure. But it is possible that violence can be an outcome, but also a stubborn, strong dependableness can also be an outcome. Whatever she does, she will do reliably. She does not want to let the other person down for fear that they might leave her, like her father did.
I'm sorry to push you on this, but could it result in her being violent to her husband as a means to control him?
It has been seen in cases before, but I'm not saying that this is the case on this occasion. We ignore with peril the issues of our past. Sometimes we get away with it, but all too often, those issues come back to bite us.
Doctor, the defence maintain that Mr. Frankield's decline is due to work pressure. However, is it possible that the trauma that has caused Mr. Frankield to dissolve into the man that we find today could be a direct cause of continued emotional and physical abuse inflicted by another person?
It is highly possible and could well be the cause. However, as could work pressure, it's hard to say for sure without an awful lot more counselling time.
I know from reading up on you that you have experience with working with female victims of domestic abuse.
Yes. I'm on the board of trustees for a charity and I get involved in some of the one-to-one counselling that goes on.
In your direct experience, why do the victims of this abuse stay where they are? Why don't they just make a break for freedom?
Sometimes they're conditioned to believe that the abuse is their fault, that they caused the physical or verbal attacks to happen. Often they're so badly damaged by the consistent abuse that they feel they are unable to go elsewhere. Who would want them? They're effectively damaged goods. No one would take them on, and they believe that they cannot cope on their own. The pain of the abuse is less frightening than the pain of separation. This is the control method used by the abusers to manipulate their victims.
In your opinion, could this have been the reason Trevor stayed with Edwina?
Objection. This again calls for speculation. And as we deny any abuse occurred, and this witness has already stated that they cannot pin the cause of the decline down, I fail to see the relevance.
I am inclined to agree with Mr. Dempsey.
I only have one more question. In your professional opinion, is the damage that has been done to Mr. Frankield, whatever the cause may be, is it irreversible?
No, I do not believe that to be the case. In cases of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, victims can over a period of time be given tools to rebuild their lives, but this can take considerable time and resources. Without it, they cannot hope to live a normal life. The PTSD will keep coming back time and time again.
Thank you. No further questions.
Dr. Wright, you clearly stated in your report, although I do believe that my learned friend may not have heard you, that you could not be clear as to the cause of Mr. Frankield's mental decline. Is that correct?
Yes, I cannot clearly lay blame to one thing.
Is it not just then possible that the stress he was under at work had caused this decline?
It is possible, but...
No further questions.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. You may step down. Do you have any more witnesses?
Yes, my lady. The prosecution calls Mr. Trevor Frankield to the stand.
Mr. Frankield, take the Bible in your left hand and read the card.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Mr. Frankield, I know this must be difficult for you. So if you need to stop at any time, please just say, and we will stop.
Thank you, my lady. Trevor, would you say you're a happy man?
I used to be. I suppose I am.
It has been a very difficult time with the pressure at work and the situation at home. Can you tell us clearly, in your own words, how have things been at home?
Edwina, she looks after me. She helps me.
Helps or controls you?
Objection.
Yes, Mrs. Smithers, I know the witness needs support, but he must answer for himself.
Withdrawn. You used to go to the pub a lot with Mr. Reynolds, is that right?
Scott, yes. He was a good mate. He is a good mate.
Why did you stop?
Edwina, she didn't like it. She said he was not a good influence on me.
Surely, if you want to do something, you should be able to do it.
I didn't want to make her angry.
Does Edwina get angry a lot?
No, not if I do as I'm told. I just get silly sometimes, disobey the rules.
Rules? You have rules?
Yes, doesn't everyone?
I suppose so. What sort of rules do you have in place?
Oh, not talking to people and handing my wallet in when I come home so she can keep control of the money, that sort of thing.
When Edwina gets angry with you, what does she do?
I don't want to say.
Trevor, it is very important that we hear the truth today. So I ask you again what she does. Trevor, look at me. Focus on me. What happens if you break the rules? In your own words, tell us what happens.
I'm home. Where are you?
I'm here in the lounge.
Did you open the door to anyone today?
No, I didn't.
Are you lying to me, you pathetic man? God, you stink! Did you have a shower today?
No, I forgot.
For fuck's sake, man, what are you, a child? I can't do everything for you. Those were my biscuits.
I was hungry.
What? So that gives you the right to steal from my cupboard? Don't steal from me again. Now go and stand in the corner. If you want to act like a child, I'll treat you like one. Oh, face the wall. I don't want to see your ugly face.
I will tell. I will go and tell people that you hit me.
And you honestly think they'll believe you? Look at my side, the bruises.
But you did that to yourself. You pushed yourself against the table.
What about here, where you hit me last week? They'll know you did that.
I was angry and I hit out in self-defence.
You pathetic scum. No one will believe that. They'll see the bruises and know that you hit me.
I hit you once. You hit me all the time. I never meant to hit you. I would never attack you.
No. And if you ever try, you will wind up in a box 6 foot under. Don't you ever forget that. No matter what you do, I'm in control of you. I'm your wife. And if you try to leave me, I will take everything from you.
Thank you, Trevor. That must have been hard. No further questions.
Mr. Dempsey, in the light of the medical reports on the state of Mr. Frankield's mental health, I ask you to tread carefully. I will not put up with you bullying the witness.
Very well, my lady. Mr. Frankield, you paint a very bad picture of your wife.
No, I don't mean to, but she has hurt me.
So you say? You say that she beats you, that she bullies you. Do you hit your wife?
No.
I will ask you that question again, and I will remind you that you are under oath and have sworn to tell the truth. Do you hit your wife?
I have done.
How many times?
I don't remember.
Once, twice, repeatedly?
Objection!
Mr. Dempsey, be careful.
I apologize. Despite not remembering exactly how many times you have hit your wife, haven't you?
Yes, but
Did you cause the bruises on Mrs. Frankield's side?
No, I didn't.
So did they just miraculously appear?
She pushed herself against the table.
Oh, come, Mr. Frankield. You asked this courtroom to believe that the injuries that my client has suffered are self-inflicted? I put it to you that you may not mean to do it, and that maybe you don't even know you are doing it, but you have systematically beaten your wife, and she has no option but to fight back for her own safety.
Objection!
Sustained. Mr. Dempsey, you are treading a very fine line.
My lady, it is only fair that the court hears both sides of the argument. The prosecution is happy to accuse my client, but she is not permitted to pass the accusation back.
You may do so without attacking the witness, and you know it.
My lady. Mr. Frankield, I wish to take you back to that scene that you just played out to us so clearly, but I'd like to suggest that things were somewhat different.
I'm home. Where are you?
Here in the lounge.
Did anyone come round today?
No.
Oh, sweetheart. You could really do with a shower or a bath. Would you like me to run you a bath?
No. Don't want to.
Okay, but please try to have one tomorrow. It's not nice for you or me. Oh, you were hungry. Sorry, I thought the lunch I left you was enough.
Well, I was still hungry.
No worries. I'll get you more food tomorrow.
You don't love me.
Honey, be careful what you say. I don't want people to see the bruises and think you're a bad person.
You deserve it.
I'll go and make tea. Are you sure you don't want that bath?
I said no. Are you deaf? I don't want a bath, so stop asking me.
Is that not more like the truth, Mr. Frankield?
No, that's not what happened.
That's not how you remember it.
No.
Mr. Frankield, where did you go on your last holiday?
I don't remember.
You don't remember where you went on your last holiday? But it was just 4 months ago.
I have memory loss. I forget things.
Memory loss. And yet somehow you remember so clearly the events of that day as you see it. No more questions, my lady.
My lady, that ends the case for the prosecution.
Very well. Mr. Dempsey, we will now hear the case for the defence.
Thank you, my lady. Your Honour, the defence calls Sarah Thompson to the stand.
Mrs. Thompson, if you would hold the Bible in your left hand and read from the card.
I swear by Almighty God that everything I say will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Mrs. Thompson, you are the direct neighbour to Mr. and Mrs. Frankield, is that correct?
Yes, I live at number 17 and they live at 15.
Have you known them long?
Yes, over 5 years.
And how has your relationship been with your neighbours?
It was really good at first, especially Trevor. He's a lovely man.
You say only at first. Did this change?
Yes, over a few years, Trevor just seemed to change. We both share a love for the garden, and I've got to say I'm jealous of his roses. Mine are poor in comparison. But then he just stopped caring and just lost interest in the garden.
Do you think he was tired?
Objection. My lady, is Mr. Dempsey going to guide her the whole way?
Sustained.
I will rephrase the question. Why do you think that Mr. Frankield stopped caring about his garden?
I suppose he was busy doing other things, maybe. But it was very strange. And after about a month had gone by, I thought I'd go round and ask if everything was okay and offer to help with the garden.
How public-spirited of you.
Your Honour.
Yes, Mr. Dempsey, you are not trying to get this lady knighted.
Is it not possible that Mr. Frankield may just have decided that he no longer wanted to bother with his garden?
No.
It's not possible?
Well, yes, it's possible, but it's unlikely. He loved that garden and I don't think he would just give up on it.
That is your considered opinion based upon...
Well, what I know or knew of Trevor.
So you say that he changed?
Yes, he gradually became more withdrawn, as if he was ill.
Are you medically trained?
No, I was trained in horticulture and I worked at the local garden centre until it closed last year.
So you consider yourself an expert on gardens?
No, not an expert, but I know my perennials from my biennials.
Quite. So you have no evidential grounding for your assumption that his health was declining?
Only what I saw and heard.
You heard his health decline?
No, I heard the arguments going on.
Do you ever argue with Mr. Thompson?
Yes, from time to time, but...
I could ask anyone in this court who's married if they ever argue with their spouse. If I did, what do you think would be the response?
I don't know.
Oh, come. You and I both know that...
Objection, Your Honour. The witness is not an expert on relationships, so cannot be expected to answer that question.
Overruled. But Mr. Dempsey, are you going to get to the point anytime soon?
I am nearly there, my lady. Thank you, my lady. So, in your opinion, would you agree that most couples argue from time to time?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Yes, but not like the...
Thank you. No further questions.
But they were really loud.
No further questions.
Mrs. Smithers, do you wish to cross-examine the witness?
I do, Your Honour. Mrs. Thompson, how would you describe your relationship with Mrs. Frankield?
We didn't really get on all that well.
You state in your written statement that Mrs. Frankield is a vicious, overpowering and totally aggressive person. Would you say that she was jealous of your friendship with Mr. Frankield?
Objection. The defendant cannot say what my client may or may not be thinking.
I will rephrase the question. How did Mrs. Frankield respond to your relationship with Mr. Frankield?
She hated it, and she showed that very clearly on more than one occasion.
In your own words, can you tell us about the events of Tuesday, the 23rd of March, 2017? To refresh your memory, this was the time when you went around to ask about the garden. In your own words.
Oh,
Yes.
Oh, hello. I just heard some shouting. Is everything okay?
It's fine. What do you want?
Oh, I just wondered if Trevor was about.
He's busy right now. Why? What do you want?
Oh, well, I just have noticed that the garden is getting a bit overgrown and I wondered if Trevor needed some support, some help with it.
What our garden has to do with you is beyond me. I'm sick to death of nosy parkers sticking their nose in where it's not wanted. I told you, Trevor is busy. He hasn't got time for the stupid garden and he does not want to speak to you anymore. Sorry if you thought you had something special between you, but you're wrong. My husband is not free to play, so I suggest you take your goodwill and you shove it up your...
Objection! My client is being portrayed here in a totally unfair manner. This is the opinion of a witness, and my client remembers the situation in a very, very different light. Mrs. Thompson, is it not true that the situation was in fact played out somewhat differently to the fantasy that you have just displayed?
Yes?
Oh, hello. I just heard some shouting. Is everything okay?
Yes. Sorry, did we disturb you? It's fine, just a bit of a disagreement.
Oh, I just wondered, is Trevor about?
He's not really in a good place right now. Not free to chat.
Oh, well, it was just about the garden. I noticed it's getting a bit overgrown and I wondered if Trevor wanted a bit of support with it, a bit of help.
That is kind. I'm afraid Trevor is not a well man. It may be some time before he's up for the garden again. I better get back in. He's not keen on me talking to strangers for too long.
I put it to the court that you have remembered only what you remember of that occasion. Mrs. Thompson, were you and Mr. Frankield lovers?
No, definitely not.
You never had an affair?
No. Our interests were purely gardening. I'm a happily married woman.
I put it to you that you are biased against my client because you are in fact in love with Mr. Frankield.
Objection!
Withdrawn.
Mrs. Smithers, do you have any further questions for the witness?
Just one, milady. Mrs. Thompson, how often did you hear arguments coming from number 22?
Well, it got worse and worse up to the point that Mrs. Frankield got arrested for domestic abuse.
Objection. My client has not been arrested for any such offence and is innocent of all charges.
She wasn't so innocent when she spoke to me.
Mrs. Thompson, you must only speak when you are asked to do so.
I'm sorry, but she's evil.
Objection, objection, objection.
Mrs. Thompson, this is your final warning.
In the months prior to Mrs. Frankield being arrested for the alleged offence, how many times a week did you hear them argue?
4 or 5 times a week, maybe more.
Thank you. No further questions.
Mrs. Thompson, you may step down. Mr. Dempsey, your next witness.
Thank you, my lady. Defence calls Dr. Paul Smith.
Dr. Smith, please hold the Bible in your left hand and read from the card.
I swear by Almighty God that everything I say will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Dr. Smith, can you please tell me your full job title?
I am the Senior FME for the West Midland Police.
Forgive me, but for the sake of the jury, what does FME stand for?
Forensic Medical Examiner.
And just briefly, what does your job entail?
I'm on call to attend situations where police are unsure if a detainee is fit for interview or has any injuries that may need treating. I also assess injuries on victims of attack and assess how those injuries may have been inflicted, as well as declaring death on scenes. The job has many other elements to it.
Thank you, Doctor. You were called to the police station on Thursday, the 21st of November, 2017. Is that correct?
I was.
And what was your particular role on that occasion?
May I consult my notes?
Oh, of course, of course.
I was called to see the defendant, Edwina Frankield, and was asked to check her over for injuries that had been found on her shoulders and arms and to ensure she was fit for interview.
I'm showing the court evidence D3 and D4. These are photos of those injuries. Can you confirm that these are the images that you took?
They are.
Did you check out these injuries?
I did.
And in your opinion, what was the cause of those injuries?
I was not able to give a full conclusive diagnosis, but I suspected that they were caused by the defendant being pushed against a wall or hard piece of furniture.
A wall or a hard piece of furniture. Were there other injuries?
There appeared to be historic injuries to the back and other side of the body, which again could have been caused by the defendant being pushed against a wall or hard surface. There was also a recent bruise on the arm consistent with a hard hand slap.
A hand slap. Interesting. You were also tasked with doing a medical examination on Mr. Frankield, is that correct?
I was.
Can you just give us a brief breakdown of the results?
Well, Mr. Frankield had also sustained numerous bruises that were mainly focused on his arms and his back, though there were signs of bruising to his stomach and legs as well.
The prosecution is trying to say that my client is solely responsible for those injuries. Could those injuries have been self-inflicted?
It is not conclusive, but it is highly possible.
So let me get this straight. The injuries found on Mr. Frankield cannot be definitely confirmed to have been inflicted by another person.
That is the case.
No further questions.
Mrs. Smithers.
Dr. Smith, how long have you been the senior FME for West Midlands Police?
10 years.
So you see a lot of cases of domestic disputes in your day-to-day life?
More and more. It's a sad fact of life that more and more time is wasted on domestic disputes.
How often is it that a man is the victim?
I would say it was rare. It is normally the woman who is the victim. Most men can stand up for themselves.
So, are you saying that my client is not a man because he was a victim of domestic abuse?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
But it is rare.
Yes, but I suppose it does happen.
You say that the bruises on Mrs. Frankield are consistent with someone being pushed into a wall or a hard surface. Is that correct?
Yes.
Could those injuries be self-inflicted?
I'm not sure I understand.
Could the defendant have pushed herself against a wall or a hard surface and inflicted the injuries herself?
It is possible, but...
It is possible.
Yes, but Mr. Frankield could have done the same.
Or someone could have inflicted those injuries on him.
Yes, it is possible.
Just one more question. Looking at the injuries that Mr. Frankield suffered, is it possible that Mrs. Frankield could have inflicted those injuries being a woman as she is?
Objection!
I will allow it. You will answer the question.
Yes, it is possible that she could have inflicted the injuries.
Thank you. No further questions. You may step down.
The defence calls Samantha Robinson to the stand.
Mrs. Robinson, you will hold the Bible in your left hand and read from the card.
I swear by Almighty God that everything I say will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Mrs. Robinson, can you tell me how you know the defendant, Mrs. Frankield?
Yes, I am the manager of the care home where she works.
Oh, a care home?
Yes, we have a mix of 60 men and women, many who suffer from dementia and other mental health issues.
Would you say that your work and the work that Mrs. Frankield does is stressful?
It can be. It can be very hard sometimes, but Edwina never let it show.
Would you say that Edwina is a good member of staff?
Very much so. She is always on time and she's often works beyond her hours with no complaint. I rely on her to help me run the home.
Has Edwina ever shown you any aggression?
Never.
Not even a hint of it?
She's the most calm and caring person I know.
Have you ever had any concerns about Mrs. Frankield's personal life?
Yes.
Can you tell us what those concerns were?
I was worried, as on a few occasions. Edwina came to work with bruises on her shoulder and arms.
Bruises?
Mm-hmm. Yes, big black bruises, just here.
Did she explain where they came from?
She said it was just an accident, but I was not convinced.
Where did you think they came from?
I'm not sure.
No idea at all?
I suspected that Mr. Frankield may be hitting her.
Objection! My lady, Mr. Frankield is not in the dock.
Maybe he should be.
Mr. Dempsey, you will keep to the rules or you'll find yourself in contempt.
I will remove the question and I apologise for my comment.
Members of the jury, you are instructed to disregard the last comment of this witness and the defence counsel.
Mrs. Robinson, just one more question. What do the patients think of Mrs. Frankield?
Objection! It calls for opinion.
I'll allow it.
I'll ask again. What do the patients think of Mrs. Frankield in your opinion?
Well, those that have a memory love her dearly, and she in turn loves them back.
Thank you, Mrs. Robinson. Just stay there.
Mrs. Robinson, how long have you worked at the care home?
I took over the manager's role 4 years ago. Before that, I worked at another home.
So you've known Mrs. Frankield only 4 years?
No, she worked at my previous home with me.
So you brought her with you?
Yes. When you find good staff, you hang on to them.
Would you say that you're friends?
Yes, I suppose so. We get on really well.
Support each other?
Yes. Who doesn't need support these days?
Back each other up?
Yes.
Cover for each other?
I don't know what you mean.
Mrs. Robinson, why did you leave your last place of work?
I'm sorry?
Why did you leave the last home that you were working for?
I got this job.
Is it not true that you and Mrs. Frankield were being investigated for a mysterious death at the old home?
Objection.
I will allow it.
But my lady, the witness is not on trial.
Overruled. You may continue. Mrs. Robinson, you will answer the question.
There was an investigation, but it was not proven.
Not proven? Thank you. No further questions.
We were innocent.
No further questions. The witness may step down.
Mr. Dempsey, do you have any more witnesses?
Yes, my lady, just one more. The defence calls the defendant, Edwina Frankield, to the stand.
Mrs. Frankield, you will hold the Bible in your left hand and read from the card.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Edwina, I'm aware how hard this whole situation has been for you, and I will try to be as gentle as I can.
Thank you.
Are you married to Mr. Trevor Frankield?
Yes, I am.
And has that marriage always been a happy one?
I'm sad to say no. We were at first, but my husband had an affair.
Objection. Your Honour, there is no proof of any such affair happening.
Mr. Dempsey,
Withdrawn.
you are instructed to disregard that last comment.
So you suspected that your husband had been unfaithful?
Yes, with the busybody next door.
How did that make you feel?
I was hurt. I felt let down.
Must have been terrible for you.
Your Honour, please.
Yes, Mr. Dempsey, as there is no proof of any such affair, move on.
Of course, my lady. Edwina, your job can be very stressful. Mrs. Robinson has already established that for us, and yet you enjoy your work.
Yes, I get a lot out of it.
Would you say that you are a patient person?
Yes, I would say that.
Compassionate?
Your Honour, is Mr. Dempsey asking the questions or making statements?
I'll rephrase. Have you ever been in a situation at your work where you have needed to hit out at a service user?
No.
Never?
Never.
Never?
Never.
Even when they provoke you?
No.
Truly remarkable.
Please.
How has your husband's behaviour to you been in the last few months?
Our relationship has been under a great deal of strain. My husband is not a well man. He's prone to violent outbursts over the simplest of things.
Perhaps, can you give us an example in your own words?
I'm home, darling. Are you okay? You look a little cold.
I'm fine.
Don't want you getting a cold, do we?
I said I'm fine.
Okay, no need to shout at me. Think of the neighbours. What do you fancy for tea tonight? I thought we could have fish fingers and some of those crinkly oven chips that you like with some fresh garden peas. Does that sound okay to you?
I'm not hungry.
You have to eat, darling. Otherwise you'll get sick. Please, don't hurt me. You don't need to be violent with me. Are you sure you don't want another blanket?
I said I'm warm enough. Why can't you just leave me alone? I'm going out.
Oh, I don't think that's a good idea, is it?
Why not?
Because you're not well enough. You might collapse in the street and that would cause embarrassment to us both. I'll make some tea.
Awful. You are a true saint to put up with that treatment.
I married him for better, for worse, in sickness and in health.
Have you tried to get professional help for your husband?
I've tried on numerous occasions, but he will not go to the appointments.
Thank you, Edwina. No further questions.
Mrs. Smithers, I assume you would wish to cross-examine the witness.
Oh yes, I do, Your Honour. Edwina Louise Frankield, what would you say is the recipe for a happy marriage?
I suppose love, trust and respect.
And would you say that your marriage had that at the start?
Yes, I would. We were very happy.
So, in your opinion, what changed?
He was unfaithful.
But we have already established that there is no evidence of any such affair happening. Is it not just something that you have decided in your head that happened and now you're unable to let go of it?
I know what I know.
Would you say that you're an obsessive person?
No, I would not.
And yet you cling on to a made-up affair with all of your energy. Tell me, is this the reason you beat Mr. Frankield?
Objection.
Sustained.
I'll rephrase. What did you do to punish your husband for his alleged infidelity? How did you make him pay?
I didn't.
So, you're telling me that the man that you profess to love, the man that you're married to, that you're totally committed to, has an affair and you say or do nothing? I don't know about you, but if my husband was to do that, I would want some answers. I'd be angry enough to confront him, yet you say you did nothing.
That's right.
Can you not see how this looks a little odd to us? Have you ever felt that way towards any of your service users?
No, I haven't. I tried to keep my cool.
Yet you and Mrs. Robinson were suspects in a negligence case at your previous home.
Objection. Both parties in this case were cleared by a coroner's court and no charges were drawn. This is just a clear attempt to discredit my client and her work colleague.
I'm inclined to agree. The findings of the report are clear, and unless you have any further evidence to the contrary, I will not allow this to go forward. Mrs. Smithers, move on.
Do you get angry with your husband?
Don't all couples once in a while?
I put it to you that if you do not get your own way, then you take matters into your own hands. I think that you were so angry about the affair that never happened, that you dealt your vengeance. You used psychological abuse on Mr. Frankield, and then you went on to inflict physical abuse on his body. He had hurt you, so you hurt him.
No, that is not true.
Let's play that scene again, shall we, and see how I think it really happened.
I'm home. What have you done? Anything? Doesn't look like it. Are you cold?
I'm fine.
Don't want you getting a cold, do we? Something else for me to put up with?
I said I'm fine.
Don't you dare raise your voice to me. I thought we could have fish fingers and some of those crinkly oven chips that I like with some peas.
I'm not hungry.
You pathetic man. I didn't ask you if you were. You will eat. I don't need you getting sick.
Please, no, please, don't hit me.
Don't you dare talk back to me. How dare you? Oh, God, you stink. Go and have a bath now.
You keep me a prisoner here.
For your own good. Besides, no one wants to see you anyway. I could call a doctor, but they'd only end up locking you away. You're a nut job, aren't you? Go on, admit it. Admit it now. You will do as I say. And if you tell, I will push myself against the table and tell everyone you did it. And as a woman, they'll believe me. Look at my arm. You did that. Now go and have a bath. You disgust me.
Is it not true that that is what happened, and not the fairy tale that you would like the jury to believe?
No, I never deliberately hit my husband.
But you did hit him.
No, that's not what I said.
No further questions, my lady.
Mr. Dempsey, do you have any further witnesses?
Thank you, my lady. No, that ends the case for the defence.
Thank you, Mr. Dempsey. Mrs. Smithers, may we hear your closing statement?
Domestic abuse is all around us, and yet all too often the victim continues to suffer, and the perpetrator gets away with it, and we close our eyes so we can't see it. In this case, many people had heard the things, but only one brave person tried to step forward by reporting the matter. Mr. Trevor Frankield is a man who is unrecognisable from just a few years ago. Scott Reynolds and Sarah Thompson bear witness to that. Two experts say in their testimony that they were not able to define the exact cause of the decline in Trevor's mental stability or the cause of the injuries. I put it to you that that is why domestic abuse goes unreported time after time. Because men and women like Trevor are so scared of their abuser that they would rather suffer than find the strength to break free. Added to this is the shame that Mr. Frankield feels that he is a man that has, in our opinion, been abused systematically, both mentally and, more worryingly, physically, by a woman who pretends that she cares. The defence has tried to cloud the issue by accusing Mr. Frankield of physically abusing Edwina. I say this is the reaction of a man who has been pushed beyond the point of control. We have heard testimony suggesting that Edwina's belief in an affair has been the cause of her physical and mental abuse on her husband. Yet, she would have you believe that she has taken no action, not even raised a voice. Mr. Frankield is, at the moment, safe. However, the prosecution is fully aware that if Mrs. Frankield is not given a custodial sentence today, she will manipulate her husband and he will be back suffering the abuse again. She has that power over him, and she is not able or willing to give that up. I ask you, the members of the jury, to allow Trevor Arnold Frankield the chance to receive counselling and support. He has found within himself the strength to stand up, to bravely face his abuser and say no. Based on the evidence and testimonies, we ask that you find the defendant, Edwina Frankield, guilty of all charges.
Members of the jury, we have clearly shown that Edwina Frankield is a patient and caring person who works with vulnerable people day in and day out. She has been falsely accused of inflicting both mental and physical abuse on Mr. Frankield. We have heard testimony clearly stating that injuries sustained could easily have been self-inflicted, that the cause of the decline in Mr. Frankield could be attributed to PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, caused by the stress that he suffered while working. Mrs. Edwina Frankield is guilty of but one thing: loving her husband so much that she has tried to care for him herself. She's received injuries, but does not seek retribution or sympathy for that. It is just part of the struggle of life, a life that she lives every day, dealing with a man who has been so badly damaged by the pressures of modern life. That Mr. Frankield needs help is not denied, but that my client is responsible for this, we do not believe that the facts prove. I put it to you, the jury, that the only safe verdict is one of not guilty. And I trust in your grasp of the findings to decide that way. Thank you, my lady.
That concludes the case of Edwina Frankield. Members of the jury, there is nothing simple about this case. The prosecution is very clear, and two people have in testimony stated that there has been a dramatic change in Mr. Frankield's personality. Indeed, the defence do not deny this. That he has suffers from mental health issues, and that he has injuries is not in question. However, even expert testimony has not been able to conclusively say what has caused this. The prosecution would ask you to believe that Mrs. Frankield is responsible for that. But has this been proved? Both parties have injuries, but again, the testimony from experts fails to conclusively conclude if these were inflicted by the other partner or were self-inflicted. The defence declare that Mrs. Frankield to be a caring woman who has tried to deal with her husband's outburst and mental health issues herself. They state that her only guilt is of loving her husband too much. There has been question of an unproven affair, and the prosecution states that in their opinion that is the cause of Mrs. Frankield's actions, and yet the defence states that she has taken no action. You must now carefully consider the evidence and testimony you have seen and heard, and you must decide. If you believe that Mrs. Frankield used coercive and controlling behaviour on Trevor Frankield and inflicted grievous bodily harm, then you must return the verdict of guilty. If, however, you doubt her guilt and you feel the case has not been proven, then you must return the verdict of not guilty. Members of the jury, you must now decide. If you return the verdict of guilty, you must now watch video A. If, however, you return the verdict of not guilty, you must watch video B.